Welcome to another DragonLance Saga episode. It is Kiranor Pale's Wealth the Fourth. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my spoiler review of the Annotated Legends War of the Twins. Now, I will be spoiling this story, so if you don't want to know it, stop watching now. Now, I'd like to take a moment and thank my collaborator patrons, the Heroes of the Lands, and invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel by visiting the links in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate link. Now, these are my perspectives only, and if you have any thoughts or disagree with mine, I invite you to share them in the YouTube chat, or if you're watching this after the live streaming of it, go ahead and throw it up in the comments. Book 1 picks up with Raistlin, Caramon, and Crysania in the Tower of Palanthas. Caramon is blind from Crysania's spell. Crysania doesn't know where they are, and Raistlin is too exhausted, he's literally passed out from casting the time-traveling spell. They move forward in time 100 years, and the Tower of Palanthas is still held under the curse, as the Master of Past and Present hasn't returned yet, as foretold. The Guardians begin to creep in dangerously close to them, and Crysania's medallion of faith is slowly losing effect to hold them off due to her lack of faith. Caramon has given up on killing Raistlin, though Crysania still doesn't trust him, and they're both in imminent danger. Raistlin stirs for a moment, telling the Guardians he is Raistlin and Fistandantlus, and the Master, and the Guardians don't believe him. After conversing with themselves, the Guardians delve into Raistlin's mind to discover who he truly is. This is where we finally get the whole story of Raistlin versus Fistandantlus. He chooses Raistlin as his new host from his apprentices because he's the most clever and doesn't yet recognize who he is. Fistandantlus begins to tell him about the Bloodstone, and Raistlin holds out until he's revealed the spell to use it. Then Raistlin attacks. They battle to exhaustion, and in the end, a black robe wins and absorbs the other's memories. Who is the victor? Not even the authors know at this point. The Guardians realize who he is and cease attacking him before he passes out from exhaustion yet again. Now, the Guardians start draining the life out of Caramon, and Crysania desperately tries to wake him, banishing them temporarily. Finally, the spell wears off Caramon, and they work to revive Raistlin together. Caramon doesn't trust his brother at all, and Crysania is defending Raistlin's abuse to her. Ultimately, Caramon leaves to get food and water, and Raistlin casts sleep on Crysania to travel to the upper levels of the tower to study the portal that he believes is there. But it's not, and he loses his mind. When he is woken, he sends Crysania to Astinus in the Great Library for answers, and Astinus demands what Fistandantlus said he would give him. Initially confused, Raistlin crafts the Globe of Present Time Passing and helps Raistlin recall where the portal is, in Zaman. Now, Raistlin believes he has changed time, but Astinus reveals that the River of Time analogy that Tracy Hickman guides Dragonlance's time with, a pebble does not change the course of a river if thrown in. So Raistlin is doomed to follow Fistandantlus' footsteps, which is revealed later in a nightmare Raistlin has. The problem facing Raistlin is that he doesn't truly know if he's Fistandantlus or if he's Raistlin at this point. They leave south and are attacked by brigands led by a half-ogre named Steeltoe. Caramon barely wins the fight after they're captured, saving Crysania from being gang-raped, and actually begins to fantasize about her at the end of the book. He turns the gang to their side and plans to take them south for more protection under the guise of attacking Thorbarden for closing their gates. Tasslehoff wakes up, and it turns out he's not exactly dead. He's been transported to the Abyss by Takesis in preparation for her return to Krynn. Seeing Taz there, which led to her knowing her future failure, she now is going to prevent Fistandantlus from saving Raistlin in his test of high sorcery, which prevents Raistlin from stopping her at the end of Chronicles, and then she can then rule Krynn altogether. Now, Taz is held in the Abyss to prevent him from messing up her plans. He is in his own personal hell here, and there's nothing around him and no one to talk to. Suddenly, a gnome appears and conveys his life quest was to create a portal, which actually worked, and now he's stuck in the Abyss too. What a coincidence! Taz shows him the broken time travel device, and the gnome starts working to repair it. Who would have thought a gnome that actually makes things work would be in the Abyss just when Tasslehoff needs him? So when Margaret was dismayed by killing off Taz, and Tracy said he wasn't worried, this was his correction? This was his brilliant plan? All right, so the annotations in book 1, or TSR, wouldn't allow the word demon into the book, so they had to have a placeholder due to the satanic panic. So when Fistendanilus summons a creature from beyond, we know that it wasn't a demon, so all of your souls are still safe. Truth be told, not even Tracy or Margaret knew what was summoned, only what it couldn't be called. And another annotation was the outcome of the battle between Raistlin and Fistendanilus is unknown even to Margaret Weis. This is one of the most horrifying scenes in the trilogy to her, as Raistlin can never know if he is himself or if he is Fistendanilus, and that he's truly lost himself at this point. Now, Tracy Hickman believes in light of the War of Souls trilogy, it was in fact Raistlin that had won. When asked about the extent of Raistlin's illness, Tracy recalls Terry Phillips in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons sessions using the voice, sort of like raspy, quiet voice, and that it commanded a lot of attention. So Margaret Weis would use that voice in the novel from time to time. Raistlin may use it to manipulate others and command the room, rather than actually being sick. This is Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman telling us that Raistlin Majere was not as frail as he led on to be. He was faking it most of the time. Now, Tracy Hickman notes that the abusive relationship that Crysania and Raistlin have, it was very similar to the abusive relationship that Caramon and Raistlin had. Now, Crysania is making excuses to others for Raistlin's abuse to her, and she believes that she can turn him or fix him with her love, but it only enables his abuse more. They've received so many letters from women sharing Crysania's love for Raistlin that Tracy fears that they may fall in real life into the same abusive trap that they wrote for Crysania. And the fact that it is an abusive relationship and people fantasize about it should be pretty telling about what people are willing to put up with. It's kind of sad when you think about it. All right, now book 2. Book 2 is about the setting of a post-cataclysmic world and how the companions Raistlin, Crysania, and Caramon are unable to alter history, succumbing ultimately to the flow of the River of Time and their own to their own dismay. It opens with Thane Duncan and Karaz discussing the conflict with the Neater dwarves in Pax Tharkaz. Karaz is doing everything he can to sway Duncan away from the war that the Neater are threatening. They believe the mountain dwarves are stealing from them and underbidding their work. The truth is far from this suspicion, as the mountain dwarves are faced with an impossible decision. They can save themselves, or they can doom their race. Now, this would never be accepted by anyone but a leader, and Duncan has made an impossible decision that will ultimately lead to war, thereby distracting those who are going to die through the winter and hopefully save those who have a small chance of survival. It ends with the Neater and a representative of the Plainsmen traveling to Fistendanilus' army, asking to join Fistendanilus' army. Sorry. Charlie, love blinds, only when you're in darkness will you see clearly. Unfortunately, so many people in that darkness don't ever make it out. And unfortunately, sometimes it ends with their life before they can see it. Okay, so then we change to Caramon and Crysania, where he professes his love for her. This is a married man who is professing his love for Crysania, knowing that she's in love with his twin brother. Now, I'm reminded of the old army saying, what happens downrange stays downrange, meaning it doesn't count as cheating if you're deployed and no one judges you for it. Now, I think this is a pretty sick way of looking at life, but this seems to be what Caramon's mindset is at right now. Crysania wants to stay in her own tent, but Caramon refuses, as the camp sees her as an actual witch. Now, we get a chapter through the eyes of the soldiers in the army, showing how far Caramon has come as a general and how feared Crysania and Fistendanilus truly are. Crysania follows Raistlin, who is suffering from nightmares of being executed by himself, a sign that he is trapped in the River of Time, unable to escape his coming death. She throws herself at him, and he nearly succumbs to temptation, then strikes out violently in the end to make his point that they cannot ever be together. And she is ashamed, she's embarrassed, and she starts to break down crying. Now, Raistlin walks away, and at the exact moment, Caramon comes walking right up to find Crysania, who tells him the truth about what just happened, but Caramon refuses to believe it and confronts Raistlin, ready to kill him yet again. Now, Raistlin knows he can't die, since Fistandanilus did not die until Zaman, so he goads Caramon on. He has nothing to lose. Now, they get a report that Crysania has fled on a horse, and they give chase. Crysania wants to bring the gods back to the citizens of the world, and comes across a plague-ridden town, and the final dying resident, who is a seeker cleric, refuses to let her heal him, since it was her god that forsook all of Krynn and caused all this hell in the first place with the cataclysm. Caramon and Raistlin follow until dark, and Raistlin wakes from a nightmare, only to be ultimately held by Caramon soothingly as he weeps in a moment of weakness. They are both reflecting on their shared past fondly, and then they hear something up in the trees. Caramon investigates and steps into a wolf trap, which hangs him upside down by the leg. Raistlin sees it and bursts into laughter, so hard even, that Caramon joins in, laughing upside down, hanging from the tree, until he's cut down. The sound they heard was a trapped rabbit, who Raistlin ultimately lets go. In the morning, they find Crysania, who has realized it's not her role to bring the gods back, but she's convinced that she can rid the world of evil by following Raistlin into the abyss. Now, as a test, Raistlin calls down fire and draws Crysania into it as a sort of trust experiment, and there's only one test left, that of blood, which will happen in the war. Now, the annotations in this book that I thought were interesting include Tracy notes that Caramon may take women away from Raistlin as his only way of subconsciously competing with Raistlin, which I think is a very strange sentiment, that Caramon would go out of his way to take women away from Raistlin, and in this particular case, Caramon's married and he's madly in love with Tika. So why he would then suddenly turn on Tika and try to get Crysania doesn't make any sense to me. But time and distance will do that, I suppose. Now, Raistlin, another annotation here, Raistlin must resist sexual passion to preserve his power. See, the way the authors are putting it, in Dragonlance, if you're a mage, you don't want to necessarily have sex with other people, because that sexual passion, that power, is taking away from your passion and power in magic. I'm not sure I completely buy this. This sounds very overly modern world religious nutjob type stuff. But okay, they wrote it. They can have whatever reasoning they want. The last annotation that I thought of interest in book 2 was that the chapter where Raistlin and Caramon are camping before looking for Crysania's trail, that's Margaret's favorite chapter she has ever written, full stop. It shows that there's a bond between the twins, and the rabbit being released presages the end of the trilogy. I thought that was very interesting. Now, the final book in War of the Twins, Book 3, wraps up Fistandanilus' accumulation of the army as they land on Abanasinia's shores and are greeted by the armies of the Neater Dwarves and the Plainsmen. Now, none of them trust the other, and Caramon devises a nice team-building exercise with a fine weapon as a reward to lure them both into playing. We get to witness Caramon's final growth from big dumb warrior to pathetic drunk, finally to wise general. All the while, both Caramon and Raistlin are fully aware, again, that they are moving with time and not against it, meaning every single thing that they're doing has been done before, and they are incapable of altering the trajectory. Now, this causes Raistlin to have those nightmares. Caramon does his best just not to think about it, still believing he's in somehow control, focusing on his soldiers and the battles ahead. They take Pax Tharkaz ultimately from King Duncan, but only because Raistlin traded Caramon's head in the future for the Dayward Dwarves' treachery in the now, in order to get into Pax Tharkaz by stopping the gate from closing all the way. This struck me initially as Raistlin just lying to the Dayward Dwarf to get his way, but it was paid off later by being a true bargain, as Raistlin sets up the moment for betrayal and ambush of Caramon. It makes Raistlin's transition from being selfish and a liar into a true sociopath. When Karaz attempts to assassinate Raistlin and actually succeeds in dealing a death blow to him in their own camp, it was a thrilling and terrifying scene, even as I realized that Crysania was there, so it really didn't make any difference, and the fact that I read the novels before. But still, it was exciting. Seeing Raistlin continuously struggling from a person of absolute power to crying out for his brother like a baby, and then shunning everyone wanting to die alone is a bit too psychotic, even for Raistlin. It presents him as a whiny bitch rather than a complete and powerful individual. Also, it bothers me how Raistlin can teleport to the exact dungeon in front of Tasslehoff and kill Nimish. It makes sense that Taz would contract the disease that his fellow cellmates have that's ravaging the land, but when Crysania came to heal him in Zaman, he didn't feel like Tasslehoff anymore. He felt like a frightened child. Kender are not supposed to feel fear. Tasslehoff actually went to the abyss, and that revealed what fear felt like to him, but only after staring face to face with the Queen of Darkness herself. So any threat from Raistlin after that seems like it should feel laughable to Taz in contrast. Now, I can justify it in my head, but the fact that Tasslehoff was suffering from a disease and the loss of his brand new friend Nimish, but it did all feel very, very off. It's also pretty frustrating that every single source book is vague on what magical item the gnome used to cause havoc with Fistandantlus' opening of the portal. But the book clearly states that the gnome was a captive of Thorbarden and fashioned a time travel device he constructed to escape confinement. Why this book doesn't not name Nimsh as the gnome, and the source books do not name the time travel device, is beyond me. It seems needlessly confused. Now, Raistlin feels like since Tasslehoff came back from the abyss, and Raistlin killed Nimsh, that his victory and breaking from time is complete. This leaves a gaping hole in my opinion, though. See, if Nimsh was in the abyss without a time travel device in Fistandantlus' time, how did he become a captive by the dwarves of Thorbarden and then gain a time travel device to use it in his cell that would then cause havoc with Fistandantlus' portal opening? It makes sense in this new timeline because Tasslehoff was the holder of the device, but time wasn't altered until Tasslehoff got sent to the abyss and Nimsh was already there. Moreover, the whole twist Takissa's planned at the end of Book 1 is seemingly totally abandoned at this part, as she allowed Tasslehoff and Nimsh to leave the abyss with a message to send to Raistlin. Why even set up the first plan in the first place, if this is what she was going to be doing? Did the authors just forget, or did they just say, screw it? The end of this is as good a second... The end of this is as good as a second in a trilogy could be, with a killer cliffhanger. Caramon defeats the ambush thanks to Tasslehoff. They try to warn Crysania, but Raistlin reveals he's a full-on sociopath now, and Caramon walks away. Then they use the time travel device, which impacts Raistlin's spell as he realizes that the gnome had already messed with the time travel device before he was killed, continuing the river of time as expected, and only by sheer will alone does Raistlin prove that he is, in fact, the most powerful wizard in all of time by keeping it open long enough to pass or be pulled through. Now, the annotations that I thought were interesting in this final book were Tracy and Margaret both share their joy at writing Legends, as it's both a prequel and a sequel to the Chronicles trilogy. Tracy related that Bertram, Astinus's assistant, the aesthetic, he's the, quote, dumb nut character to Astinus's genius, so that we, the audience, can understand Astinus. He was modeled after Dr. Watson from the Sherlock Holmes books. Fistandantlus entered the portal. This is a nexus event in which many possible outcomes can happen. Now, the way that Tracy Hickman describes it, the High God chooses the ultimate outcome, or optimum timeline, in order to have the river of time flow unimpeded. So you can argue that nothing anyone ever does matters, because even when there are branches in timeline, this High God can do whatever he wants and sets it all right in the right path. So apparently letting Raistlin in so that he will make the decisions that he makes in the final book in this trilogy are the only reason why he wasn't destroyed, not Raistlin's ability as a magic user. It's strange when you start thinking about time and you hear Tracy's rationale for the High God choosing what he does, because you suddenly realize that the High God is the only God in control, and all of the actual pantheon of deities are just children that are just playing around, and all of the mortals are the children's toys. It kind of, I don't know, it distances me from this world as an active world of possibilities, and instead impresses this idea that no one has any free will ever, and it's all just the high gods choosing. Of course, all of this is ultimately leading into the War of Souls, so you can see that the groundwork for the War of Souls is being paved even as early as the Chronicles trilogy. Another interesting annotation was was standing before the portal, talking with Caramon. Tracy Hickman notes that this is where Raistlin truly becomes a sociopath. He is no longer trying to border on being a good independent person. He is a full-blown sociopath. Now, here is my problem with Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weis's writing of the characters Caramon and Raistlin Majir. They pretend like these ultimate psychological disorders can just be overcome by will or love or something. If Caramon was an addict, an alcoholic, he will always be an addict and alcoholic. That is not something you get rid of. That's something that you struggle with your whole life. But apparently, he just sort of worked it out of his system through exercise in the arena in Istar. And Raistlin is a pure-blown sociopath, according to the authors at this point, which means that he doesn't care about anyone or anything except for himself, and he cannot feel emotion. And yet, there is the final act of this trilogy which proves otherwise. So they either have no idea what these words actually mean, or they just don't care, and they're just going to throw them with reckless abandon to try to make us understand that they don't really have a plan with these characters at all. It's really frustrating when you start to examine it. That being said, I actually really love this novel despite its faults, and I would absolutely recommend it, this version of it, the Annotated Chronicles. I would totally recommend it to anyone who's a fan of Dragonlance. But, and you have to put in a big but here, these annotations break with common understandings of these stories. So if you're okay with that, if you're okay pulling back the screens and looking behind and just seeing, instead of the Wizard of Oz, this old, wrinkly, small man, if you're okay with that, then definitely check out these annotated versions. If not, just read the traditional ones and just love the books because they're great. Now, again, this is a great second act in the Legends trilogy, and it gives real insight into Raistlin's fall from the character that we knew into something else entirely. A monster of sorts who not even he recognizes. Caramon has finally realized who he is, and he no longer needs Raistlin. Their connection is severed, and for him at least, there seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And that is as far as I can really go with this review. What did you guys think about this? Did you have any thoughts that maybe are in contrast to the author's annotations or in contrast to my own and how you perceived it? And before, as you're thinking about that, go ahead and throw it up in live chat. Isaac, thanks for joining live, man. Appreciate you. For those of you who are tuning in, today is the 4th of August. Tomorrow, the 5th of August, is actually Larry Elmore's birthday. So if you can hit him up in social media, if you have social media, give him a shout out. Tell him happy birthday. He is a huge reason, because of his artwork, that this series this campaign setting is as popular as it is, because of him and the other artists in addition to the writers and other contributors. So I think it's worthy of a happy birthday if you have an opportunity. Yeah, I genuinely don't like Raistlin at the end of this book. Not because he's now fully the bad guy, because I liked him the first time I read this series. But now, with these annotations, I think he's just a worthless character. Like, he's just, I don't know. And maybe it's supposed to be that way. I just didn't read it that way the first time. Caramon is the only one with any redeeming qualities at the end of this. And, you know, the next book is going to reveal some of Raistlin's redeeming qualities, but there's so much back and forth between characters and motivations and decisions that seem to be in stark contrast with previous motivations and decisions and retreading of old ground that these characters have already seemingly learned from, that I really don't think these authors have really thought this through when they were writing it. Like, I think somewhere I read that they wrote one of these books, it was like in a month or something. So I can't remember which one it was that Margaret said that about. But it would make sense if that were the case, because they were just trying to rush through it. Yeah, Mad Crow, you're right. Raistlin was always a love-hate type character. I agree with you. It's just before I loved that I could hate him, and now I hate that I can love him. And it's a thin line to be on one side or the other of, but I think it's an important distinction between the way you look at the character. Because he, at this point, if you're thinking about in the chronicle of this book being written compared to everything else that had been written and will be written, they did not know as writers if Raistlin was Fistandanalus or not. They didn't know which one absorbed the other. They just know that they were absorbed together. And so you have to really consider whether or not they even think of this character as Raistlin. And reading the annotations from Margaret Weis's point of view, you can tell that she's really bummed, because Raistlin was her favorite character. She's really bummed that you don't know, and she doesn't know whether Raistlin is even Raistlin anymore, or whether it's just something entirely new, this new amalgamation of the two greatest wizards to ever live, who just call themselves at the exact same time Raistlin / Fistandanalus. So maybe we should come up with like one of those Hollywood names where they like merge the two man and woman that are dating into one name, into like Fiston. Instead of Raistlin and Fistandanalus, it's just Fiston. Kind of adult connotation with the reference to. Dragons of Autumn Twilight was written quickly. Not sure if that. I don't think that was the one that was written in a month. They were at a deadline with TSR for one. I wish I would have written that annotation down when I read it, but I didn't. So if someone else knows for sure, please shout it out in comments if you're not joining us live. Yeah, Krysania, she arguably the stupidest character ever written. Like she literally watches the king priest like fall to his own ruin because he requested too much from his god. And her takeaway was that he demanded it rather than asked it. Are you crazy? How can you take that away as the learning? So she's going into the abyss with Raistlin thinking, well, I'm just going to ask Paladine to, abolish all evil in the world. And that's going to make it okay. The king priest failed because he demanded it. You think Tone was the reason he threw a rock on the planet, you dumbass? Stupidest character ever written. And it's frustrating because they treat her as if she was Lorana. Every time Caramon looks on her, or every time she's praying and Raistlin looks at her, they're just like, it's like a cartoon. And they just have like hearts pounding out of where their eyes should be. And their tongues are lolling out of their mouth because they're mad and heat with her, because she's supposed to be this gorgeous person. Meanwhile, she's a complete religious nut job that isn't even in line with her own religion. Like, how insane is this character written? I can't be the only one to see this. It's crazy. But anyway, hey, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you, man. Fantasy writing in the 80s was different than today. Expectations are higher, but Dragonlance deserves a Netflix series. Okay, I like where you're going with that, Ryan, but I want to ask you this question. If they did a Netflix series today, would you be okay with them changing up the sensibilities to modern sensibilities? Because I don't think you could have a scene with an ogre named Stilto ready to gangbang Crysania in a Netflix series today. I don't think they could do that. But that is clearly what was going to happen when Caramon stepped up to fight him. Like, they did everything but explicitly use the words gangbang. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would do that with modern sensibilities. That would be a very, that's like an HBO thing, not a Netflix thing. And maybe, you're just meaning streaming series, in which case, as long as they keep the tone, Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Ryan. Absolutely, the HBO difference. As long as they keep the tone, I'm fine. Not that I want them to do that to her. I think that's fucking horrible. But there has to be a reason that Caramon's willing to die in order to fight this clearly more powerful opponent. And it can't just be that they're going to smack Crysania around. You know what I mean? There's got to be some gravity to the situation to really, really warrant it. So that's a toughie. Personally, you wouldn't want them to change it, but everything is today. You don't want them to touch DL. And that's the other part of it, is that everyone nowadays who loves Dragonlance, like everyone who does, we don't want them to change it, because the reason why it was so great is because it did challenge your sensibilities. It did, it sort of broke molds. And even though other novel series were doing it, I don't recall any Dungeons and Dragons novels doing it. And so, it's a young adult almost novel, even though it's not by modern standards young adult. But it's clearly written more complex than your traditional young adult novel, which, it's like we want them to do something with it, but then if they do and they mess it up, it's going to be like Star Wars fans losing their mind over the sequel trilogy, I mean, we're just going to lose it. And so I don't know. Like, I would love to see something great as long as it's great. But if they show us something that's really bad, does that make it worth it? It's tough. It's really tough. That being said, I would love to see a live action with special effects fight between Raistlin Majir and Fist and Daedalus, the Dark One. Oh, that would be amazing. Just amazing. And to see like any of those battle scenes, like the Battle of Pax Tharkaz here, or you go back to the War of the Lands, any of those, that would be the greatest. Seeing the flying citadels just hovering on the horizon as dragons are just swarming out of them. Ugh. Yeah. That would maybe be a little bit too much for me to handle. Super exciting. All right, that's all I had. Thank you guys so much for joining in the live chat. I know I don't give a lot of, or any, warning when I'm going to do these live shows. The truth is I'm on vacation right now, and I wanted to get this out before I left town. So I just sort of threw it together as soon as I was done reading the novel. So I'll try, I have to commit to trying to give you guys more notice so that more people can join in and, give their thoughts and stuff. Because every once in a while I do get some really nice heated back and forths in the chat. In the comments. That would be really great to have in the chat. Because then everyone can sort of see what's being said and, sort of chime in and stuff. It just makes it a lot more fun, I think. Jonathan, thanks for joining live, man. It is exciting, the possibilities. Okay. Have a fantastic afternoon, everyone. And, if this is your coming weekend, have a great weekend. Until, here on. I got an outro. I might as well read it. That's it for my review of the Annotated Legends War of the Twins. Have you read the annotated version? Do you enjoy the reviews I'm putting out here? Feel free to email me at info@dragonlance-saga.com or comment below. I'd like to once again invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel, and you can pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link, all of which are in the description below. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga, and I hope you'll join me in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.